Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Volcano AC, and in this episode I'll be talking about the compressor settings and limiter settings in the portable recorder, the Zoom H4n Pro. I don't intend to give you a lesson or a lecture on what a compressor is or what a limiter is. I just want to give you a general idea of when we want to use a compressor or a limiter. So basically the compressor is gonna bring down those very high levels and is gonna bring up the low levels. For example, you're recording some vocals and you have some portions of your vocals that were very loud, so the compressor is gonna bring them down a little bit, and also for those parts that you recorded that were a bit low, it's gonna bring them up. So the compressor will bring a more balanced audio. So not too high, not too low, just right then, very nicely balanced. Now the limiter is completely different, because the goal of the limiter is that you set a particular threshold and it's gonna stop anything that wants to go above that threshold, and it's gonna squash it down to the threshold that you determined from the very beginning. So these are basically the two different applications, one for the compressor and the other one for the limiter. So the Zoom H4n Pro has both compressor and limiter. However, as far as I know, you cannot use them both at the same time. If I am wrong, please put it in the comments below and also explain how to set them up simultaneously. You'll have to use, as far as I know, either the compressor or the limiter. And if you choose the compressor, there's some settings. There's ones that's recommended as a general compressor, there's another one recommended for vocals, and one recommended for drums. And if we're talking about the limiters, then there's the limiter that is a general one, and the concert one, and the studio one. So in this video, I'm gonna be giving you all the parameters that the compressor and the limiter are using, okay? So also, just as general terms, I'm not intending to give a lesson on this particular items, but the compressor and the limiters have a particular threshold that has been determined in your portable recorder, Zoom H4n Pro. Then it's gonna have a ratio, then it's gonna have the output level, the attack time, and the release time. So just very briefly, what is the threshold? The threshold in the compressor is one thing, and the threshold in the limiter is a completely different thing. The threshold in the compressor is the number in decibels on which the compressor starts compressing. So basically, when in the loudness scale in decibels, it starts doing its job. Once the levels reach that amount, it starts compressing. Whereas in the limiter, you set up the threshold, which means that's the maximum that your limiter is gonna allow. Anything that goes beyond that, like I said earlier, is gonna squash it down. So that is gonna be referred in this video as the threshold. Alright, now let's talk about the ratio. Basically, the ratio determines how much compression will occur when the signal level exceeds the threshold. Low numbers mean little compression, and high numbers mean more compression, high levels of compression, all the way to limiting ratios, when it becomes from truly compressing to a limiter. Then I'm gonna show you the output levels of each of these compressor settings and limiter settings. Basically, how much volume will go up after the compression is done or the limiting is done. Then I'm gonna show you the attack time. The attack time basically is how fast is gonna that compression start, that limiting is gonna get started. So small numbers like 1 millisecond, for example, is super fast, and big numbers like 900 milliseconds, that means it's slower. So that means it's gonna take more time for that compression or limiting to get started. And then I'm gonna talk about the release time. The release time is after that compression has started, how fast or how slow is gonna let it go. Basically, a small number, 1, that means it's gonna be super fast, 900 is gonna be very slow release time. And just as an example for this video, I am going to record with both my regular Rode microphone connected directly to my Canon M50, and I'm gonna compare that to a recording of my voice with the Zoom H4n Pro in the compressor number 2, which is the vocal one, okay? So right now you're listening to me with the Rode microphone, which is just right next to the Zoom H4n Pro, and now you're listening to me through the Zoom H4n Pro recording using the compressor number 2, which is the vocal compressor. So tell me in the comments below if you listen, if you can hear a particular difference between before and now. Let me switch back to the Rode microphone. And now I'm talking in the Rode microphone. Now let's switch back to the portable recorder. And now you're listening to me through the Zoom H4n Pro portable recorder. Final time, let's go back to the Rode microphone. And now let's go back to the Zoom H4n Pro. This is my voice through the Zoom H4n Pro with compressor number 2, which is the vocal compressor. Alright, I hope you can hear the difference, and now let's go and see the specific parameters for all the compressors and limiters. Let's go! Alright, let's start from the beginning. To turn on your Zoom H4n Pro, you just pull that little button over there and it starts turning on. Okay, it says now loading. It has the SD card, as you know, in this other side over here. There it is. All right, we have it on now. So remember, when the red light is over here, that means it's on these 2 mics, but when it is over here, it changes to the number 1 and 2 inputs, which are this 1 and 2. So we want it on the number on the mic, so it goes right there. And basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna push the menu button here on the side, and it's gonna take us to the main menu section. So you see the folder for where your files get recorded, or the particular files that are in your Zoom device, which right now I don't have anything. And then we get to the input section. In that input section, we push this double arrow button, and then you can see you will find the low cut first, and then you will see compressor, limiter, and you can go down for some other options, but in today's video we're just gonna deal with the compressor and limit. But I will give you a tip, something that I do all the time when I record vocals and when I record my acoustic guitar, like I'm gonna be doing today. I always put the low cut. That way I get rid of all the frequencies that get into the mics below 80 hertz. Okay, so everything below 80 gets doesn't get recorded. And you can actually use some other settings here. You can have some low cut filters that are with a higher number, however, higher frequency number. But the reality is that for vocals or your instrument, like the acoustic guitar, a low cut of 80, it's ideal. So we don't want to go more than that or higher than that. All right, so now let's check out our compressor limiter. We push again here on the right side of our Zoom portable recorder, and you will see that right now there's in the microphones there's no compressor or limiter on, so everything is off as it's indicated over here. So we're gonna click again, and here you can select, for example, this will be the general compressor. Just to give you an idea, the threshold for this compressor is minus 48.7 dBs. The ratio that it uses is 9:1. It has an output level of 6 dBs, an attack time of 7.2 milliseconds, and a release time of 968 milliseconds. Okay, so if we compare the general compressor to the vocal compressor, which is this number 2 here in this list, this compressor is good for vocals and reduces high-level sounds and raises the minimum levels. So the threshold for this one is minus 8.4 dBs, and the ratio is 16:1. Remember, the general compressor, the ratio was 9:1, so that's a big difference. The output level in dBs is 0 for the vocal compressor, and the attack time is 1.8 milliseconds, so it's way faster than the standard compressor that was 7.2, and the release time is 8.7 milliseconds. Okay, now if we want to see the compressor number 3, is great for drums. So basically this also reduces high-level sounds and also raises the minimum level. The threshold here is minus 48.2 dBs. If you compare to the vocal, it was minus 8.4, so it's a huge difference, the drum one versus the vocal one. And the compression ratio is 7:1. It has a plus 3.6 dBs as output level, an attack time of 12.3 milliseconds, and 947 milliseconds release time. Okay, now when we go to the limiter, so if we keep going down here, when we see the limiter, this is just a standard limiter with a threshold of minus 14.4, a ratio of 60.1, the output level is 0, and the attack time is 6.4 milliseconds, and a release time of 528 milliseconds. Still for this limiter number 1, which is the general. Now, if we want the limiter number 2, this limiter is good for live performances or live recordings with a threshold of minus 13.8 dBs, a ratio of 32:1, output level of 1.2, attack time 1.9 milliseconds, and release time of 8.5 milliseconds. Okay, so the release time of this one, it's pretty similar to the compressor of the vocals, which is 8.7 milliseconds. Okay, and finally you have the limiter number 3, which is the studio one. And they recommend this for studio recording, and the threshold for this one is minus 12 dBs. The ratio is 8:1. The output level is 1.2 dBs. The attack time in milliseconds is 6.5, and the release time in milliseconds is 423. So very different than the live performance limiter, because it was only 8.5. All right, I hope that the parameters on the compressors and the limiters are of good use to you, and stay tuned, because in my next video I'm gonna be recording acoustic guitar with the Zoom H4n Pro, and I'm gonna be changing from compressor 1 to compressor 2, etc., all the way to limiter 3, just to see which one sounds the best for when you're recording your acoustic guitar. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. And if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button. Alright, thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!